I'm here with Ben Wolff, and we are going to explore the aspects of turning pottery into a business today. And this video was brought to you by Palmstreet. Palmstreet is a live shopping app and marketplace for plants, exotics, and all kinds of crafts, specifically ceramics. It's a great place if you're getting into pottery and starting to sell your stuff to find people that have plants that need a pot for it. Very relevant to what we're talking about today. So Ben Wolff is kind of like a brother to me.
Pottery brothers.
Because a long time ago, well, in my life, it feels like a long time ago, 15 years ago, I wrote to his dad, begging his dad to allow me to come into this very workshop so that I could learn from him. And your dad finally relented and said, okay, and then I came, and since then I've been coming every so often to learn how to make flower pots. And Ben, over the years, has developed a very successful business also making flower pots. And the reason I wanted to talk to Ben today and share this with all of you is because you have turned this into a business, but this wasn't something that you started out doing, right, Ben? Like, what were you doing before pottery? How were you making a living?
Well, yeah. I've made pots, for my whole life, little bits. I didn't take it seriously until high school. Mm-hmm. At that point, I was milking cows on my stepfather's dairy farm. Mm-hmm. Then I went into masonry, carpentry, painting houses, but I was always making pots with my dad on the weekends. Mm-hmm. And finally, the weekend sales overtook what the 40-hour work week was doing for me. So that's when the light bulb went off. Yeah. I was like, let's try to do this. Let's do it. And it was just a natural progression. And finally, I think in 99, 2000 area, I said, let's just do it. Let's try it full time. And it's been good. There's been ups, there's been downs.
Yep.
But yeah.
This is what's very sort of fascinating to me. Pottery, for me, has never been a business. And when I got into it, I never had the idea of making money from it. I kind of still don't. But I will say that I'm very lucky to now be in a place, really from learning from your dad, where I'm making so many pots just because I want to learn how to make the perfect shape, right, that I end up with 200 pots.
Exactly.
And the pots are good enough to be sold. But I really wanted to talk to you today because your perspective with pottery came from a place of income. And there are so many people out there. I mean, when it turned into a full-time career. Yeah. And there are so many people out there who, I think since the pandemic, pottery has kind of exploded.
It did. It exploded.
I couldn't get a wheel during the pandemic.
Right.
I mean, it was hard getting ceramic supplies. Right. Kilns were out of stock.
They were lost at sea.
Yeah. Well, they were just sold out. Yeah. And since the pandemic, I have been hearing so often, I'm like really into pottery. Which
it's a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, people have literally, even Brad Pitt got into it.
Yeah, exactly.
During the pandemic. So
Seth Rogen now has like a thriving business doing pottery.
It's amazing.
So what I'm also hearing from people is people trying to figure out how to take this thing they love and turn it into a kind of business.
Yes, if you can take something that you can do and love and turn it into your business. That's what everybody's dream is. So I got lucky. I had my father.
And
So I was able to do this as a side thing. When I was a kid, I didn't want to be a potter. I wanted to be a musician. I'm a guitar player too, or a drummer. I wanted to be an actor at one point. Like I did acting things. Like I wanted to do stuff. But in the end, I love making pottery. So it worked. And it ends up that I get to do what I love to do for a living. So this is... And
it kind of found you.
It did. And it pulled me in. My dad obviously lured me in.
Yeah.
I should say, lured.
His dad has been making pots since he was like a teenager. And Guy has never stopped. And Guy has kind of really established this persona as being the preeminent flower pot maker in America. And that's why I came here. So being here is always a huge inspiration for me, just not only working, but watching the two of you work. So for you, I know that today we're in Ben's dad's shop, Guy's shop, but you make most of your pots in a basement.
I do.
It's a small space. It's a basement. You sort of rig things up to make it work, and you've been doing this for like 24
since
years.
I think 2003, 2004. I
So-
went off on my own and with my obviously help with my wife, Corinne. But I literally make in a boiler room, which is like fun and creepy because I do live videos too. And
Yeah.
people are
Ben has a
watching.
YouTube channel. You should
I
follow
do,
him
yeah.
if you're into pottery. At Ben Wolff Pottery.
Thanks.
At Ben Wolff.
Yes, at Ben Wolff Pottery.
At Ben Wolff Pottery.
But in those lives that I do, I always joke, this is my creepy basement because there's pipes and there's this and that, and I try to get the cobwebs, but that doesn't always work.
You figured out how to make it work, which
It's
is
tough.
It is tough, and this is the thing. It's like, I think when someone has a hobby and they're trying to figure out how to transition into a business, there is this place where they do start thinking about selling, and for me, there is a little bit of a danger there, is because you do need to actually learn how to do the thing.
Yeah.
Like, I believe in order for something to warrant being sold, it needs to reach a certain level where you're genuinely able to say, I'm making this and I'm proud of this and this is made properly.
That's it. And it's not even a joke, but as we've joked that the first few thousand are the hardest. And I was lucky with my dad, he was able to let me make a few thousand pots and we just threw them back into the clay mixer and mixed it back up.
Yeah.
So I didn't grow an attachment to every piece. Like each one of those wasn't my baby. It was just me doing it. And
Kind of playing.
But getting over that I have to keep this. This is so important to me. This one piece is everything. Because this pot I made earlier, it could come out and there could be a crack in it. Well, you have to get used to disappointment.
Yeah.
You have to get used to the fact that things are going to happen. And I was lucky enough to have that. Not everybody is making pottery. I got lucky. I was born into, a family that had a potter in it. So this is it's a hard thing to get into. It's a hard thing to turn your ideas from I want to do this, and then I have to become a salesman. So you have to shut off that one side of the brain that you're an artist and turn on a businessman side, which for me was the hardest to do.
Yeah.
So everybody has their own thing. Some people go straight to the business end. The business end was to me.
Yeah.
So.
This I've realized over the years that with these things that have really interested me from the craft side, you focus on them and you work on them, and when you're allowed the time and the space to create, like it sounds like as you were growing up, you were just throwing on the weekends, without this pressure of having to make money from it. This is the sort of the irony, is that you need that in order to give yourself the space and the time to get to a level where you can sell it. But if you have this idea over your head, the first time you sit at a wheel and you've never done it before, I'm going to start making things and selling them. My advice, and I think you would agree with this.
I'm already agreeing with everything you're saying.
That's too much pressure. That's too much pressure, because you're going to be sitting here, you're going to make a horrible pot or nothing at all, and then you're going to say, but this is so bad, and I need to make something good because I need to sell it. Right. You're going to shoot yourself in the foot if you start with this attitude, and this is what's really hard. My advice to people that want to turn pottery into a business is find the time to make pottery and then go get a job at a restaurant or bartending or at a coffee shop. Pay your rent with that money so that your bills are covered with that. Move out of a place that's expensive and get a cheaper place so that you can afford the rent from your 9-to-5 job, and just focus on making pottery and enjoying it. And maybe you'll reach a place where one day you're proud of your work and your work really warrants being sold. The wonderful thing for me about watching Ben and Guy work is that their flower pots, because they make glazed things as well, their flower pots have to be functional. They're going to hold a plant in it. So these shapes aren't just shapes. They're often dictated by what's going inside. Could we maybe just see you throw something?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
I would love, maybe if you could throw this shape.
Yep, we could do this one right here. Definitely.
How many pounds of clay is
This was 4 pounds.
So when we talk about the pounds of clay, there's a number 4 on there. It means that it's 4 pounds of wet clay.
First thing to do, we have to wedge. I already weighed out the clay. This is 4 pounds. So I do the ram's head wedge, which is basically making it look like a ram's head. But what it's doing is it's pushing the air out from here out. So as I push, it's kind of like kneading bread, but instead of putting air into the material, you're getting it out of the material. So once that's ready to go, and you can feel it, you can feel if there's any air left, I simply roll it, get it into a shape that I like to use, and that piece is ready to be thrown. So I actually take a little piece of wet clay and just make an area for it to like glue onto. Then I throw the piece of clay on the wheel.
That sort of sticks it, and that like slam is very important, because if the clay isn't properly attached to this, as you start pushing on it, this is like the comedic thing that most people encounter the first time they've done this.
Yeah.
They go to push on it and it flies across the room, it flies off the wheel. But the clay has to be strongly adhered to the wheel, and that slamming or throwing the clay down is absolutely mandatory.
Yeah.
Like at the beginning.
So next thing, I just have to center the clay, which I know this is for beginner potters, that looks like, okay, you just push the clay together. But what I'm doing is I'm literally pushing in. Everybody's got a different way to do this. So some people push together. Some people go like this. My personal favorite thing to do is push with this hand and pull, but I also turn it at the same time. And what that does is it cones up the clay. So it brings the clay up. It's a push and pull thing. And then I just bring it down. And right here is where I decipher. We're going to do that last pot we just showed. So I decipher the width of the bottom. And this is where I do that. So I'm getting that width, and that's where my width is going to be. It's right about there. I feel a bit of an air bubble, but I'll work through this. So right here, I went all the way down. I created a drainage hole, and I'm lifting up, and I'm pulling out to create a base.
Because it's a flower pot, the bottom of the pot needs a little hole in it.
Yes.
Whereas if someone was making like a vase or a bowl, you would not make a hole in the bottom.
Right. And some people, if you're making flower pots, you can make the hole afterwards. It doesn't matter, because if you're used to doing it without doing a hole in the bottom, and you're not a flower pot maker by trade, then yeah, that would make sense. So this next move I'm doing, I'm literally just pushing out, and I'm pushing in with my other hand, and every rotation I'm lifting up ever so slightly. So, and I've got to slow this down a little bit so it's even. So I'm pushing out, I'm pushing in, and now I pick up, and every single rotation, I just move up a little bit, and that brings up the clay. And every time I get to the top, what I did right there is what I call teeing off, but it's basically just compressing the rim. Everybody has different terminology for everything you do. So usually it takes me 2 pulls to get to the height, and this is about the height that I want to be at. And then I take what us potters call ribs, and this is one that I made. This is a potter's rib, but in ancient times, people would actually use animal bones for ribs.
Like the rib of an animal.
The rib of an animal bone would be a perfect curve for the inside of a bowl.
And that's where the term comes
So
from.
that's where the term comes from. So the next move is I'm literally just going to push out. I'm going to hold this rib still, and I'm going to lift up at the same time to do the same thing I was doing, except I'm pushing it against the rib, which straightens out the piece.
It's like the magic.
That's a magic moment.
It's like that's where you can, even though no one's saying anything, and often when customers are in here, you hear them going, oh,
that's the
like
moment.
at that moment where they go, oh, because it goes from being a very impressive like vessel, but into, oh, now it looks like a flower pot.
It is that moment. Everybody does the same thing. They go, right when you see that, and it's cool. That's my favorite part of throwing. I don't know what yours is.
When the rib hits it?
Yeah.
When the rib hits it, it
Yeah.
it comes to life.
Yeah, it really does. It arcs everything.
So now you have another rib.
I do. So I do two different things. So I get this one for my height.
Yeah.
That's just a basic, I use that for height. But I like to use this one, which is just a plasti rib. But I can put my finger right here, and I can get a good angle on it. So I do things differently. Everybody's got their own methods.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you do this either, but you just use one rib, right?
Yeah.
But because I need to make thousands of these to be exactly the same, I need to get the same height every time and same width every time. So I have different methods for that. So my hand is a specific size, so I know that is going to be a good size. And if I was to rest it until my hands have a problem, that's what I do.
You just measure with your hand.
Well, I used to measure with an actual measuring thing, but I realized that is the size of my hand when it's like out.
For this number 4.
For this number 4 wide pot or half pot.
Yep.
But when I'm relaxed, that's a good 2.
Mm-hmm.
So until my hands become ruined from doing this, and I get carpal tunnel, I can still do it that way. And I don't do that all the time. After you do it thousands of times, you feel the right size. So I do a second rib pull. And then with this pot, I like to, just for the look of it, I put a line right about here every time. And then because this is going to be a scalloped or pie crust rim, I like to add a little bit of a line on the rim itself to make it look like it has a split rim. So what I did before was flatten this rim, and now I'm just adding a little bit of water to the rim. And this is a little tool that I made to cut under, and I use this for everything. So I don't know if you've ever used this, Rajiv, but this is just a handmade piece of metal out of a piece of ducting that I made. All of us potters usually make our own tools. So so I add a little bit of water. I use the right angle on it to create a line. Now that I've created a line, I just go back, I add a little bit of water on this and pull out the rim.
For a little flare.
For a little to flare out the rim.
Mm-hmm.
And then while I'm doing this, I put a little water on the bottom on this side, and I use this cutter tool with a 45-degree angle to cut in, and this alleviates a lot of the trimming process for me. So I'm always try to work smarter, not harder.
To save yourself time later.
Yeah, I mean that's a lot of clay I would have just had to trim off with the knife.
This is the thing that I learned from your dad, like that in industrial potteries.
Yep.
Like there's not a lot of trimming. You don't make things and trim away half the clay.
No.
You throw it to the shape.
And to be able to do thousands of those, or I mean there are potteries that do that, and they have a specific person that just works on trimming.
Mm-hmm.
So, and while I'm doing this, I'm a little bit OCD. I have to have this be clean. There's no, like, if I have fingerprints on it, I don't like it. It's just, in my opinion, that's just the way I like to do things. Everybody's got their different methods. But now that this piece is basically done, and the rim is flared out, this is where I take my first 2 fingers and a thumb, and I do this action. So everybody's got a different thing with this.
Yeah, I would do it. Like,
you would do
with
one.
2 hands.
Yeah, some people do it with with 2 fingers and one and make big ones. But for me, I like to just literally. So I line this up, and I line up my middle finger, or my pointer finger rather, and I just make a pie crust.
It's so funny. Like it makes a different shape.
It does.
Than when I do it. Like the different methods actually create a different shape.
Exactly. And when I get to this point right here.
What do you do here? Like how do you make sure that it's
right
even?
here, so you could, I didn't mention this, but when I got to right here, I estimated in my head if I could actually get over here enough. So I have just enough, and I line this up with my fingers, so I can feel that this is, this weight, this width.
Sort of even.
Yeah, so this one is going to have to be a little bit smaller because there wasn't enough there.
Oh.
So it's a little off, but if you literally...
and if you didn't say that, no one would know.
Nobody would know. I didn't. Yeah, exactly. And in fact, there's us potters always joke, if you see a warble in the pot and the pot's going like this, how do you make that warble stop? You stop the wheel.
Oh yeah,
and the warble's gone.
Yeah, like if it's uneven, it's you're right.
Yeah.
You only see it when it's turning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, you'll see it later if it fires and it gets to the point where it really distorts. But that's always been a joke that I've always said, like, oh, that pot has a warble in it. Does it now? And I stop it. So then, to finish this pot, I have a stamp with my name on it. I have to make sure this is clean.
This is a very old technique. Like even in Impruneta in Italy this summer, everything is stamped.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a maker's mark.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's funny, my dad didn't used to do maker's marks on his pots. And one day he went into a antique shop, and this is ridiculous.
Because his dad was making pots that looked like they were from the 19th or 18th century.
Yeah.
And he just wanted to make old style flower pots because they were so beautiful, and then went into the antique shop.
So yeah, he went into the antique shop, and somebody was selling his pot as an antique. And he said, "That's not an antique." And they said,
I made that.
Yeah. That's pretty much how it happened. He said, "How do you know it's not an antique?" He said, "Because I made that." So that makes sense. So he started doing that, and then when I got going, he made me a little stamp that said Ben Wolff on it, and to tell my timelines of when these pots are made, my dad, and I know you do too, stamp a date on it.
Yeah.
Which I don't, and that I stamped a number 4 right there, which indicates that the poundage of wet clay used, which is also used for our pricing system as well. But I do not stamp the date, and the reason I don't do that is because I sell to a lot of stores. So what it does is create a shelf life.
Yeah.
So somebody might come in and go, "Oh, there's 3 2023s left. Why didn't those go? I want the 2024s." So if that happens, whatever. But so what I do is every few years I change my stamp just a little bit, and not only I really know how to do what it looks like, but I can
date them.
But I can date them.
Do you know that was a thing like in the English potteries?
Yes.
That the stamps on the bottom,
Yep.
they changed over the years, and we can tell that this is a Wedgwood plate between 1840 and 1860 because of the slight change in the logo and the fonts. Like that is traditionally something that was done. And
and I literally didn't think about that when I was doing it. I was just like, I want to do a new stamp, and I was like, so I did a new stamp. But then I started to go, well, wait a minute. If I do this every 4 years, at least I can say, every 4 years there's a progression of where it is, and I can tell. Which, thinking about it now, I probably should have on my website or something to show those dates, but that's something for the future.
yeah, I mean, I think retrospectively, in these potteries, it's only many decades later that people started looking back and trying to date a plate.
Yes.
So this will all happen after you and I are long gone.
Yes.
Oh.
But people have asked if people have come in and asked, is this a vintage Ben?
Yeah.
I'm only 43 years old. I'm going to be 44, but at this point, they are vintage because I think it's 20 years, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's some that are definitely vintage.
Now, the pots that you were making on the weekends, like when you were a teenager in your dad's shop, did he sell them in the shop? Did he sell the things that you made that survived, like not being crumpled?
So we literally threw them back into a thing for a long time. And then one time we were like, he's like, "Oh, why don't you just leave those?" And I was like, "Okay." I came back the next weekend, and he's like, "Here's some money." And I was like, "From what?" And he's like, "I didn't know what, I was like, "What is this?" And he's like, "I sold your pots." And I was like, light bulb, like, really? Like, somebody
How old were you?
I think I was probably 15.
Really?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe 15, 16. So that was kind of a light bulb to go, okay, let's try this. So I made some more. They sold. Made some more. And then probably within the first year, I took my car, which I got a car when I was 14. I saved up, from working at the farm. And I took the car illegally because I didn't have my license. I went up to a nursery and drove up and said, "You want to buy my pottery?" And the very nice man who owned the building and his son, he said, "Hey, you got the cojones to come in here and ask me if I'll buy, to buy your wares? I'll take them all."
Wow.
And I was like, "Okay, that's so cool."
That's really nice.
That doesn't happen every time, but it happened a couple of times, and that's all I needed. They saw him in one place. Somebody else, another store saw him. Then they started contacting me, because that's a big point about trying to make your things and sell them. the embarrassment factor. It's huge.
You have to be willing to have someone say no to your face or why.
Yeah.
When I started going door to door in Toronto, asking people if they wanted me to rewrite their chalkboard on the sidewalk, one of the most common things was why. And I at that point had enough confidence to go, because I can make it look a whole lot better than what it looks like now.
That's awesome.
That looks very bad, and I had pictures of previous ones that I had done.
Yeah.
But I will say, when people ask me for this advice of like, how do you start, one of the things you need, I think as a young person, is you need someone to throw you a bone.
Yes.
You need one thing to give you some confidence. And that moment when your dad gave you that money, that was like your bone. Like for me, when I was in Mean Girls, that was my bone.
Yeah.
It was like, I got this part after auditioning for stuff for so many years and getting nothing.
Right.
And every year I was like, I don't know how much longer I can play the bubbling Indian head guy going in. Like, I was like, I can't do this anymore.
Right.
And then when I got that part, it was like a bone.
Yep.
And in my life, every 10 years or so, a bone is thrown to me.
Yep.
And it keeps me going. And if you're starting out with something like this, especially pottery, I have to say, do not be discouraged, because it takes so long and so many failed pots. Like, how many thousands of pots do you think you've made in your life?
If I added them up,
Yeah.
it would drive me crazy.
Like over 100,000 probably, right?
Well, I don't have the money to show that, so I wish I did.
No,
No,
like
if you started thinking about that, if it was 100,000 pots at a certain amount, like, you're probably right.
I'm saying since you were 15. Like,
I mean, it's a few thousand at least. It's thousands of pots a year. So you do that,
for 25 years.
Yeah, I have 25. Actually, I think I'm hitting 28, which is ridiculous because most people, have a 30-year career.
Well, this
like,
is what I mean.
It's
So
coming up on that, and you're right. It could be.
Your dad has been making pots for over 50. So
I wish I could go back. So anybody that's starting, instead of making getting discouraged and this and that, the pots that you actually keep, take note on how many you made, because in 30 years from now, when you look back, if you're doing this, that would be the greatest thing to be able to do, is answer somebody like Rajiv and say, actually, I know that number.
And try to make the same shape.
Yeah.
I mean, early people getting into pottery and trying it out, and they just make whatever. They make whatever their hands can make on the wheel without it flopping or being off-centered. But when you start to become proficient at it, which is probably like at the 5 or 10 year mark, like, try to make the same shape. That's when your dad enforced that on me and set up the stick and said, make them all the same size and shape. It's a challenge, and that's when I really felt like I was learning something.
Right.
Like, to have to make the same shape 200 times, it really teaches you something.
It
And
does.
like you made, where is it? It's over there drying, like that one over there.
Yep.
And Ben didn't even have that pot over here, but he just made the exact same shape, and it's because it's in his hands now.
It's a muscle memory. It's literally, like, people say all the time, oh, how did you get it to the same size? It's like, well, it's just like a mechanic going, I know that that's a 14 millimeter wrench. They just look at it and they just know it. So it's,
When I was in high school, my sculpture teacher, like the room that had the pottery wheels, she was British.
Yeah.
And she actually didn't teach throwing because she didn't know how to throw. And what she sort of explained actually was motivation to me on the wheel. She said, I don't know how to throw because in Britain, potting is not considered an art. It's not taught at art schools. Sculpture is, ceramics are, like modeling sculptures out of clay, but not pottery. In England at the time, pottery was a blue-collar trade, like plumbing. They didn't look at it as something artistic. So you went to a school, you learned how to throw, and then you were a potter, but it wasn't art. And that really helped me. Because when I got on the wheel, it helped me realize, like, oh, you can do this. It's just technical.
Yes.
And then eventually, when you become proficient at it, you can understand how to infuse art into the shape.
And that's it. And I think it was the invention of the tin can that changed all that. Potters were tradesmen. If you didn't have a potter in your village, you were eating off of a slab of wood or whatever you can find that was
Or to put
probably
your
moldy.
sauerkraut in, like it was like Tupperware.
Exactly.
It's like you're
Right.
pickling cabbage. What do you put it in?
Right.
In 1810,
Right.
you buy a crock from a potter that's salt glazed, and you
Right.
put it in there, and you cover it with a piece of waxed cloth.
Everything
It's
was
like-
used
Yeah.
with pottery, and and that was my draw too. It wasn't just my dad, my father, but it was also we're a part of history with people that make pottery. We've traced our civilization through shards of pots or actual pots. We've been, thank goodness, with all the carbon dating, we've been able to tell, hey, this pot was here
10,000
years ago. Exactly. These people were here 10,000 years
Yeah.
ago. We were able to trace civilization through it.
Because once this is fired, it becomes stone. So when my friend realized that, when Laura was making pots, she's like, and look at how much garbage people are firing. it's like
We're
just to
polluting the
think
planet with
this
pottery.
cannot be destroyed. So that's another word of encouragement / discouragement.
Yeah.
If you make something ugly, just scrap it.
Yeah,
and,
break it down.
And throw again. Don't fire it, because that's not going anywhere. You can't destroy that. Someone's going to find it in the ground 10,000 years from now. You want them to find that nasty pot? No. And I like, yeah, it becomes kind of permanent.
Yeah, it does.
This was fascinating to watch and share with everyone, I'm sure.
Thank you.
I think we should go into the shop and just look at the shop
we
together.
do it. Is that what we're going to do?
You wash your hands off, boy.
All right, I wash my hands off.
So here we are in Guy's shop, and this was my first introduction to this beautiful property, is walking in here and seeing all of the things that Guy made in the back room. And Ben recently started selling in here, right?
Yeah, for the last 3 years, I've been coming down, and they've been nice enough to let me share some showroom space. And I'm able to make pots while I'm here. Otherwise, that's kind of the only way my dad and I can hang out.
Because his dad's always working.
Me too. So
And
it's,
Ben's
it's just
always making pots.
It's just crazy, but yeah, no. So this is the one area of mine.
And these gray pots are one of Ben's sort of signature looks. These gray pots, you've been making these for quite a while, right?
Yeah, I started making these probably in like early '90s. I got lucky. Martha Stewart wanted them for her whole greenhouse, and said, "I want everything in Ben's gray," and that was, like I said, another boost. And yeah, so that was cool. So I've been doing that, and it's probably my biggest seller.
The gray pots?
Yeah, for the color of the pots.
Yeah.
I also do a plain white.
Like this one right here,
Yeah, I
right?
do a plain white. I also
This big pot.
That's a big one. Yeah, I think that's a 25-pound pot. Dad stuff.
These red pots are pots that Guy and Erica have made. And these right here, these are called the peel pot, which some of you might have seen from my posts with this rope around here. This is a pot that Guy made, and it's inspired by the pot in a very old painting from 1801 of Rubens Peel with a geranium, the first geranium brought to America, and a cutting of that was given to Thomas Jefferson. So the shop is full of things made by Ben and by Guy and his wife Erica.
Orchid pots.
Oh, here are some of my orchid pots. Made these, earlier this year.
Rajiv orchid pots.
Ben orchid pots.
And then there's a
Beautiful
couple of your
gray
pots over here.
Oh yeah, right. So these are the trumpet shaped pot. A very simple shape that I saw like. So what happens in here whenever I come to visit, Guy says, "What do you want to make?" And I usually like go out and look at everything in the shop and find something that I want to learn. And last year there was a point when Guy had made these beautiful pots in this simple shape, and I said, I want to learn how to make this. So these are a few examples. Nowhere near the pros.
No, you did a great job, Rajiv.
But they're-
you always put yourself down.
but
It's
they're-
ridiculous.
they're
This
still
guy can just, I want to do this, and he does it. So not everybody can do that. I couldn't do that. He did.
Wow,
He just, I'm going to do that.
it's fun.
So,
And then it's stamped with my name. So your dad has, you talked about the tools.
yeah.
Like your dad has made me so many tools over the years. When I come here and I say like, oh, how do you do this? He's like, oh, you need a tool for it. And where did you get that tool? Oh, I made it. And then he runs down to the basement and he makes me one. And it has been the sweetest thing over the years to have this whole array of tools that have been made by Guy, including stamps with my name on them. So sweet. Here are some of the. This is called rope under rim. This is a pot that Guy makes.
Behind it.
He makes the larger ones, and Erica makes these smaller ones. I love Erica's pots. They're so delicate, and she just has like a different hand. And then here's one that I made. Is it mine? Yeah, signed. So there we are. Ben Wolff and I wish all of you potters out there much success. Do not be discouraged. Keep going. Practice, practice, practice. Thank you for watching.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome.
I think that it's just,
Yeah.
I feel honored. And for anybody who, like, he's such an inspiration to so many people. He doesn't want to hear it. He doesn't like compliments. I know him. We know him too well. But he is. He's an inspiration to everybody, and I can't thank you enough. Thank you.
You're welcome, man.
And thank you for your friendship.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. And make sure to follow and subscribe to Ben Wolff Pottery on YouTube. He's just started, so he's new. You show him some support now. Show him some love. Bye.